Hello and welcome to the Dr. Karen Show. I'm Dr. Karen Ruskin. For first-time viewers, let me tell you a little bit about myself and then we will get started with today's interesting show where we have a phenomenal guest who has traveled far just to come on the Dr. Karen Show. All right, so scoop about me. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I provide counseling. I'm on the national news, including Fox News Channel, Good Morning America, Lifetime Discovery. I'm a go-to doc for a variety of print media as well as radio, and I have my Ask Dr. Karen segment on Fox News Boston. All right, so now that we got a little bit of background, as you know, always you're welcome to submit questions to me anytime for the Dr. Karen Show. My email address is drkarenruskin@msn.com, and you can always find out more information, read interesting tips on drkarenruskin.com, or follow me for my mental health tips on Dr. Karen Ruskin, Twitter, of course. All right, let's get to our guest. Today, our guest expert coming in, he is an education commentator. His name is Dr. Jonathan T. Jefferson. He has driven here from New York, special to be on our show today. Dr. Jefferson.
Hey, Dr. Karen, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming. So you had a good drive over.
Absolutely. Nice, easy drive, nice night's sleep, and ready to go.
Excellent. All right, so let's rock and roll today. First, before we start talking about our topic, I want to congratulate you for your published book.
Oh, thank you very much.
Mugamore.
Yes.
It's gotten a lot of positive feedback, I hear.
Absolutely. First, people laugh at the title, and then they get intrigued when they see the little child's face, and then the story itself has been getting a positive response.
Congratulations. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Exciting.
Yes,
Exciting.
yes it is.
So why don't you share a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to ask you some questions that are going to provide parents and educators with some really profound insights from you.
Okay.
Share with us.
Well, I'm a school administrator from Long Island, New York, a school district administrator. I've been in the world of education for over 20 years, working with school-age children, grades K through 12. I'm also a trained therapeutic foster/adoptive parent, and I enjoy sharing my insights with teachers and parents regarding how to address and how to meet the needs of our youth.
All right, so Jonathan, Dr. Jefferson, being an education expert for 20 years, what would you say is the most important insight that you've discovered that you would like to share with parents and educators today?
Well, one thing is for sure, over the last 20 years, we're no longer guessing at how students learn. Okay. There is plenty of empirical research out there that informs us how students acquire language, how students retain information, how students reach a level of mastery. So it's no longer throw it at the wall and see what sticks. We actually know what helps students to learn.
Okay. So with this insight then, how do you feel it has affected teaching and learning?
Well, unfortunately, even though we have this information, more often than not, we're not applying it. For example, we've known for decades that language is best acquired during the formative years. Students learn language between birth and age 6 better than later in life. However, most of our schools still begin language instruction when children are adolescents. They start in 7th or 8th grade and through high school, instead of moving language instruction down to grades K1 and 2, where they're more likely to acquire the language. That's just one example. Another example is we know that students cannot retain information if there are large gaps of time in their instruction. Most of the nation still has 2-month summer breaks for most students.
Right,
and that's a detriment to their learning.
Children wouldn't want to hear that, though.
Children and many camps wouldn't want to hear it. But the reality is we need to keep them enriched throughout the summer. Not just a handful of students, not students that need extra help, but all students cannot afford to take a 2-month break in their instruction. And a lot of schools end up spending the first couple of months of the year reteaching what was taught the previous year. So that's another dilemma where we have the research that shows us one thing, but we're still doing the other.
Well, I'll tell you, if you were running for class president, you would not get the presidency based on that philosophy. But today you are sharing it from an education standpoint, not trying to run for child class president.
Yes, although in junior high school I was class president.
Were you class president in junior high school?
Yes, I was.
That is very cute.
Although I didn't have this information back then.
That's right. What did you run on? What was your you remember what your...
I don't know. It was probably, you know, a better cake bake sale. I really just don't remember the topic. We're going a little bit too far back.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Common Core standards. A lot of educators are talking about this now. How would you explain this from your lens?
Okay. Common Core state standards was motivated by a couple of realities. First reality is the United States went from being the #1 nation in education to barely maintaining our standing in the top 20 among developed countries. So that was number one. Number two, there was a recognition that every state and many communities had their own standards for education. So if a child was educated in New England and was considered a high honor student, their standards were considerably different than a child in the Gulf Coast states.
Right,
you know, so if you're in Mississippi, Alabama, or Louisiana, your standards weren't the same as a student coming from Vermont or Massachusetts.
True.
So colleges and universities and places of employment, they became savvy to this, and obviously they're going to take a child who is coming from a more rigorous program. So this was a recognition that nationwide we didn't have a uniform set of standards. And in the initial stage of trying to close that international gap is first we need a common standard. That's where you get Common Core state standards, where the standards were written for each grade for college and career readiness from K through 12.
Okay, so you have provided some information that I'm sure a lot of people, the lay public, doesn't really know. A lot of the educators might know, but the lay public might not know. So let's take it a step further. What is your opinion of Common Core standards? Do you have concerns about it, or are you yippee-yi-yay about it?
Well,
Thoughts?
number one, I'm all for the common standards. I'm all for the rigor. I'm all for increasing our standards to get students to be college and career ready. So the standards themselves are a positive. My concern is that we take those standards and we start to apply the results of state testing to the performance of teachers and principals. Because anything new takes years of implementation before it becomes a normal practice. But already we see that there are states such as New York who are developing their state assessments to mirror the standards, and they're also tying those assessments into teacher and principal evaluation.
Right.
That can be dangerous because, for example, if I'm a 5th grade teacher and we're only in year 2 of Common Core state standards, the level of rigor on the test assumes that these children have had Common Core state standards in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd and 3rd, when in reality they've only had it for 2 years, so they're not possibly going to perform at the level that they should or that is expected through Common Core state standards. And now you're tying that to the teacher's evaluation.
Right.
Now as a teacher, I might say, you know what, I may be highly effective, but I don't want to teach certain kids now because if they're struggling, that might hurt my evaluation, which may in turn hurt my ability to make money and provide for my own family. So by having high stakes testing and tying it to teacher and principal evaluation, when we're just unrolling Common Core state standards, that can be extremely dangerous.
Okay, so when you talk about it, you know, I could even see the passion as well as the concerns that you have. So let's look at this now. If there is an increase in pressure on the teachers, on the principals, on educators, for them to adapt to what the standards are, to what the pressures of the academic world is. What happens now? What happens specifically to kids? One might think, well, maybe the pressure's good. Maybe now kids will get the kind of attention they need. But from what you're talking about, it sounds like you're directly inferring that there are concerns that there is detrimental effects to the kids. Most specifically even, perhaps misdiagnoses may occur.
Absolutely.
So talk about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because what's already happening, I was in a meeting yesterday morning where a math director mentioned that one of his teachers had 30 students in her pre-college algebra prep class. And that teacher didn't want 17 of those students because those students were struggling learners. So a few years ago, it wouldn't have been an issue. That teacher would simply have differentiated their instruction for those students and brought them along at their pace, which is what an educator should do. But now that teacher is thinking, at the end of the year, the state assessment that they take is going to be tied to my evaluation. I don't want those students in my class. So that's the first negative effect. You have highly effective teachers who don't want to teach those struggling students.
That is definitely a negative effect.
Absolutely. And then on a flip side of the coin, you might have students that you cannot remove from your class. If you have a self-contained classroom, you're a third grade teacher, as we went through school, you stay with your group all day, there's no place to put you. So maybe I can take the onus off of the teacher by labeling that child. Maybe that child's not meeting the standards because that child is learning disabled, they are ADHD or what have you. So now I already personally feel that students are being labeled too quickly. And now you add the high stakes testing on top of that, even more students may end up being labeled far too quickly, just to take the onus of why they don't perform off of the teacher.
Wow.
Heavy stuff.
And you are, really, and you're concerned about this.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, from your experience, if we put this all together, for parents, if you could give advice to parents, or should I say, help them to be aware of something, what awareness, what mindfulness do you think, if you could name one thing, should parents of school-age children be aware of nowadays?
The parents need to be aware that their children should be learning toward mastery. And I'll give an example. Several years ago, I was in a doctorate program that was strictly for school administrators, whether they were science directors, math directors, assistant principals, or superintendents. There was over 30 of us from all over the country, and we were at the Seton Hall program, and we had a guest lecturer come in who does lectures all over the world, and his topic is specifically education and technology. However, he did a test, which he does in Asia, which he does in Europe, and he did this test just to show us where we were truly from the systems that we came out of, which was the American education system. And in this test, he asked us a question. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember it exactly.
Sure.
But he said, okay, an object is falling, from a certain height, a certain distance, at a certain rate of speed, what is the answer? So something along the lines of this is X, what is Y? Now, we have all administrators in this room, all highly educated individuals with multiple college degrees, including science and math directors, and after several tries, we could not get the answer. He does this same example in Europe, he does the same example in Asia, and they look at him as if to say, why are you asking us such an elementary question? Because it comes up to them like this. And the reason he did that was to show us that we learn how to master a test. We don't necessarily learn how to master the subject. And in Europe, it's the reverse. They don't have high stakes testing. They're not about passing the test. It's about mastering, and in Asia, about mastering the material. So when you master it, you've learned it for life. And whereas we are mastering taking a test. So,
I'll be darned.
Yes. And believe it or not, it is from the video gaming industry that we learned how to truly attain mastery. Because the video gaming industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they want to keep their clientele addicted, so that they continue to buy into the video gaming. So what they learned is that a few elements have to be present for someone to, number one, become addicted, and number two, gain mastery at the video games. And thankfully, that same research is now being applied to curriculum. But for example, when you're in a video game, you enter at a level that you're comfortable with. So you need to ask your child in school, are you comfortable with this, whatever the subject they're working on? Are you comfortable with this math? Are you comfortable with this English? And if they say yes, that's a positive. Number two, with the video games, they found out that immediate feedback is important. So if you make a mistake in a video game, you know right away. It's bang, you're out of the game. So ask your child in school, when you take an exam, when you bring in your homework, when do you get to know whether you were right, or when do you get to know that you're on the right track? And if they say, oh, maybe tomorrow at the end of the week.
And that is often what happens. It's not till
Yes.
a week later that you're getting your test back. The teacher's going over the test.
Yes. And sometimes.
Certainly not immediate.
Exactly.
Very much so what you're describing is this hysterical, metaphor with regards to the gaming industry, but it is so in sync with parenting philosophy. As a psychotherapist, as a parenting expert, I often teach my clients when I'm providing family counseling of the importance of providing immediate feedback and consistent feedback
Yes.
with their kids if they expect to see behavioral change. And you know what? When I'm providing counseling for couples, it's the same thing. If your spouse is saying something that you like or doing something that you like, give them positive feedback.
Yes.
People need feedback. So you're taking this concept that I apply every day in my practice with clients, and you're considering it in a broad way and saying in school, in the entire school system, kids need this.
Yes. And this is how, and these are the questions that parents should be asking their child. And also the third and final piece is in a video game, you know what level you need to attain to reach mastery, where you can now trade the game in and go get another one. So ask your child, okay, in this math that you're now doing, let's say they're doing addition, do you know what it's going to take for you to then move on to the next level, which might be fractions or decimals, what have you? And they should be able to give you an answer, because then now they know what they're striving toward. So if you query your child on these topics or using these basic questions, and you find out that this is a deficit, you now know what to address the teacher about.
I like that. So you heard it, parents, straight from Jonathan T. Jefferson. This doctor knows what he's talking about. And what did you take away from today? Take a moment. Think about it. What key points? What can you take away as a parent? How can you help your children master their material? Educators, what did you get today from hearing Dr. Jonathan T. Jefferson's advice, thoughts, insights? What's your takeaway? Take a moment to think about it. Okay, so I'm thinking that before we wrap up, we attended to today's subject matter. Let's take a turn. Let's spend a few moments to talk about something more personal. So, Dr. Jefferson, who I knew as Jonathan, viewers, we went to school together. Back in our day in New York, we grew up in Queens, we went to elementary school together. Now, what's interesting is when you're a kid, you don't know the challenges of another kid. You just know this is a kid in my class. I like him. Nice kid. That's it. Case closed. That's all you know. But in talking now as adults, I come to discover that you were one of those kids, right? You were being bussed in.
Yes.
And there are people who question, oh, why? Why are you bussing kids in? What's the difference? They'll be fine wherever it is that they're living. This is a special example of, busing in does matter. You feel like it made a difference in your life.
Absolutely.
So if you could share, why do you feel that busing in played a role in what's gotten you here today as you and I sit here? And I'm talking about that you're an author, that you're accomplished as an educator. How did that play a role?
Well, when I was in my neighborhood school, which was a block and a half from my house, I was bored. Here was a kid who spent his born and raised in Queens, but my folks had a farm, so on a farm I got to run around and be free in the summer, and then we would come back to Queens, and all of a sudden you had to be the rigor of going to school, and you couldn't just run around and do whatever you wanted to do. So school became boring, and I started running away from school and playing in backyards, and I just wasn't engaged. So my mother decided, okay, there was 8 of us, I was number 7 of 8 kids, and she decided for my youngest 3, we're going to get in a busing program that takes the students to predominantly white communities and have them educated there, because then he'll be in an environment where he's not familiar, and he certainly wouldn't be running back home when you're going 10 miles away. And what happened is when I got there, the students were light years ahead of me. you know, I was 2 years behind my classmates in 3rd grade when I was bused to school.
Yeah.
Now, they didn't label me and say he's special ed or he's learning disabled. They simply gave me the extra supports I needed. They gave me a special reading class to go to a couple of times a week. And they also held me back a year. And they said, you know what, he needs time to catch up. So they held me back a year. And I was one of those children who had kindergarten. I was 4 years old when I entered kindergarten. I'm a November baby. You know, so it wasn't pulling me back a year. It wasn't necessarily changing the age group dramatically.
Right.
You know, so and that helped. They simply gave me the additional supports I needed, and I caught up. By 4th grade, I no longer needed deep reading help. I was on par with my peers in this school, and when I went back to the neighborhood, I was now light years ahead of my peers in the neighborhood because of the busing. So that gave me the confidence to succeed all the way through high school, as opposed to earning a GED and dropping out, which a lot of neighborhood children did.
Right.
You know, and also gave me the confidence to go on to college. Why? Because my new peer group.
Your new peer group.
That was an expectation to go on to college and what have you. So I had a lot of great friends I met there, a lot of experience I would not have had if I stayed in the neighborhood.
Right.
I went to multiple bar mitzvahs, you know. And I was like, wow, this is a great party, and you know, and to this day, you know, many of us are still great friends. You know, one friend of mine, I hear from him. We used to call him Todd. He now uses his given name Pinchas, and we communicate from Israel back and forth. But I would not have had those opportunities to make those enriching friendships, and you know, if I hadn't been bused to school, and I wouldn't have had the confidence necessarily that came. I was a second in my family out of 8. The first finished college, and then 16 years later, I graduated from college. So it wasn't an expectation to go to college.
Right.
You know, so
because of your mother's wisdom.
And the busing.
Mom, and because of the opportunity that the schools provided for busing. And because of your willingness to take advantage, think about this, you were a young kid, you did take advantage, in a good way, of this opportunity. You used it as an opportunity. So by placing you in an environment where the expectations were here, which was by busing you into a neighborhood in Queens, in Whitestone, expectations were here, versus where the expectations were in your neighborhood, you rose. And you became the kid that you were and the man that you are today. It's a really fine example of opportunity, desire,
absolutely,
parenting.
And also, I want to give a lot of credit to the teachers, because a lot of it is about, yes, the parents have their expectations, but teacher expectations make a huge difference. I didn't get to that school and have teachers that said, well, he can't perform at this level.
Right.
They said
that could have legitimately have happened.
Yes.
He can't perform. He's beneath. Instead, it was, let's hold him back so he can catch up, so he could be where he belongs, and he's going to rise to the occasion.
Exactly. And there was a study done years ago that actually took, I don't know how they got this through what we call IRB, you know, but where they took a class of students who were high-performing, gifted students, but they told the teacher that they were low-performing students. And they took low-performing students and told the teacher, oh, these are high-performing students. At the end of the year, those so-called low-performing students outperformed the students who were previously labeled as gifted, which tells me teacher expectations has a lot to do with it.
Such a good example of how teachers matter. Teaching really matters. Children are affected in the now and for the long run by their experiences in the classroom. And really, if there is a takeaway from your story, not only is it about what your experience mattered for you, but your experience is symbolic for many children who are given an opportunity of being able to be in an environment where they can be the best version of themselves they can be. So I appreciate you taking the time to share a little personal story here. And the boy that you mentioned, who's now a man, back in those days, I remember as well, because we were all in a play together.
Yes, we were in the pajama game.
We were, viewers, yes. We were in a play.
And guess who was the star?
The 5th grade play. I did enjoy that, didn't I, back in those days?
That was fantastic.
Fun.
That was fantastic.
Teaching matters. My memories are really positive because of choices that teachers made. So, all right, well, now that we had a serious conversation, now that we had a fun, goofy, personal conversation, I say we're going to say goodbye to our dear Dr. Jonathan Jefferson.
Well, thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm really glad that you made it. You drove here. You had a mission, your desire to share your insights with the many, and you got to do that today.
Yes, I did.
All right, so I'm saying goodbye. Goodbye.
Thanks, Karen.
My pleasure. And viewers, as always, you know what you put into your life is what you get out. So make wise choices, because the choices you make today cannot not affect yourself and those you love. And always remember, I'm cheering for you. I'm thinking about you. I know you can do it if you put your mind to it. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the Dr. Karen Show. Bye for now.